So you're looking for 600,000 gallons worth of disposal.
We were at that time.
So what are you looking for now?
Right now, due to, because we also have issues with infiltration getting into our sewer system. Our sewer system goes back to the 40s, so we have a lot of I&I, they call it infiltration and inflow. So we've been actively looking at that. So back when this permit was being developed in 2005 and 6, our peak flows were over 600,000 gallons a day on springtime, and our yearly flow, we measure we up to 140 to 150 million gallons in a year that we had to get rid of. And we kind of look at on a total, because we had a storage pond of 90 million gallons that we use to store and then spray it, because we spray normally between May and October. So we kind of track that. Well, now with the efforts we've been doing with reducing the infiltration into our system and conservation measures, the last 2 years we're down to 100 million gallons per year. So we reduced it almost by 50% just by getting out the excess. So now as a result, with the studies we're doing here, we looked at our long-term growth. We're not looking at expanding our sewer into other areas. We're just going to have infill from where the sewer system is now. So we see that the future is not where we need 600,000 gallons a day. We feel we can, we have some growth, but the growth is going to be countered by the reduction in II flow. So we're looking at around 300 to 350,000 gallons a day for the long-term permitting. So almost 50% less than was originally permitted for the site. That being said, when we studied the site in its natural conditions can't sustain that kind of flow under the original design, because we still have that issue. It comes down the hill, it hits, it's traveling at 60 miles an hour, it's doing great, and all of a sudden, boom, we hit a roadblock. Now it's going at 5 miles an hour. The soil just slows it down, and there's just not enough area for the water to weep in so that it breaks out. As it's going through the wetlands, it's doing the damage to the wetlands. So that's all these studies and going on, went on to look at that. Then once we got done the lawsuit, we sat down with the state and we did an administrative order by consent. So now we sat down, we laid out a long-term program to say, okay, let's start again. Let's look at all options again. Let's look at abandoning the RID site and see what else we could do. So we looked at the potential of putting a pipe across the lake to Guilford and to the state wastewater facility in Franklin. That was always the original plan back in the 70s. They called it the Winooski River Basin Project. They were going to sewer the whole lake, and ours was a 20-year temporary solution until the sewer came around. But when the economics of that program fell apart, where the feds were paying 75% and the state 20% and towns only 5%, that's happened in the 70s, well, that's long gone. So the only way for these projects are for the municipalities to carry that cost. Well, that cost is $80 million to go across the lake. We looked at going down through Alton, because Alton has issues. They are all on septic systems on ledge, so they have a lot of problems. And yet, because they don't have a centralized system, no one's going after them, but in fact, they have some serious problems there. So we looked at whether we could tie, well, that's going to cost more money to go down to Alton, pick up Alton and bring them up, and they would have to pay their share. And then we reached out to the Winooski Basin people, and they were like, hey, fine, you want to come in, but you're going to have to pay all that cost and maintain all that infrastructure and pay
to upgrade their system, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So now the price was just crazy, and now we can make the case that we're protecting the jewel of the state, not just Winooski is our huge cash cow for us. It's our golden egg, so we need to protect it. But there's nowhere at the state level, so we're still back at a level trying to solve our problem. So we looked at other alternatives, looked at other sites in which we might be able to do groundwater infiltration, and looked at reducing by splitting up the facility, different things, but none of it makes sense. The next closest option would be to buy additional land along the power line, which would be up, and these are all private tracts, so it's all probably conservation trust, which is kind of how we like it. And we'd have to expand. We'd be looking at maybe $20 to $30 million, and it would require us potentially trying to negotiate or take land by eminent domain, spreading out the system, make it more complicated. So we came back down to this site and say, how can we fix this site? And we wanted not to have a theoretical solution, we wanted a real solution. So when the engineers came up with ideas, let's test them out. And that's when we started doing the pilots. And then 2016, we did pilots 1, 2, and 3 to determine whether or not we could use the natural soils to reintroduce the water, collect the water where it's breaking out, and then bring it back down to the brook. And that field, even the natural soils down along the brook,
Was that when we
capacity.
came out and you did a little show and tell?
Okay, so you remember that one, right?
Yeah.
So that was the
2016?
2016. 2017, we said that failed. Now we want to create what we call an engineered natural solution. So we want to get the water back in the ground, so we're collecting it with the above ground piping. And that was a temporary solution, so that where it's breaking out, we put sandbags, directed the water into a pipe, into a flow chamber where we split it, measured it, put it back into the ground, into about 100 feet away from the brook, 4-foot diameter beehive, kind of has holes in it with 20-foot stone all the way around it. So we put the water in, the water then infiltrates into the stones, and then down about 10 foot deep, we have about a 10-foot wide, 1 foot thick, it's on a stone, 1-inch stone that goes below, underneath the wetlands and come up into the brook. And we constructed that by using a sheet piling, about 20 foot wide, through the wetlands, into the brook. We had all this permitted too, so we just went through as a pilot. Took all the wetland soils out, put the stone underneath, the wetland soils back on, revegetated it, and then had what we call a chimney up to the brook. And again, now if you've seen that, and that's what we'd like to show you more, that looks natural. We were able to put all the wetland soils back, so now the structure, which is in the upland area, we have about 100 feet of the stone, ground stone that's in there, and it comes up into the brook. And that went online in the summer of 2017, and we ran it through the winter up until about February this year. Very successful, done about 70 gallons a minute. So we convinced the state in our reports, and again, I kind of got off track on the reports, but the last report here, which is December 22nd, 2017, has the results of that pilot and proposes to build 4 or 5 of those ENSs to get the water back in the ground. The other piece of the solution...
Where is that pilot located on? Is it annotated on this?
It is not, but if you go where it says, in the center it says Wolf Sand Trap, and under that you see test pits 16.2, 16.01, and then test pit 16-8. So 16-8 is where that pilot test number 4 is.
Okay.
And when you can see there's kind of some wetland, little wetland symbols. So where that test pit is up in the upland area is where we put the 4-foot diameter structure with stone around it, and it went through the wetlands up into the brook up in that area there. And that's still being monitored. We have piezometers and testing that we're still kind of keeping an eye on it. But now we've stopped the flow to it. So what's happened now is be concerned about how do we collect the water coming into the wetlands. So the area too, I kind of sidetracked, but the central and the western areas, those discharge zones are all have too much water. The slopes and the soils cannot handle the amount of water we're putting into them. So what we need to do now is go upstream of those, upslope, put in a trench, which would be nothing fancy, about a 10-foot deep stone with a perforated pipe, in which we would collect the groundwater, but monitor it so that we don't dry out the wetlands. We want to still let the wetlands get their water, but to take out the excess capacity, pipe it around, and then put it back in the ground in the ENS systems that will be constructed along the brook. So in 2018, we appropriated money to go ahead and permit, design Pilot 5 to prove that we can intercept it properly. And one thing about the pilots too is, well, the engineers are great. I used to be an engineer a long time ago. Before now, I just manage people in projects, but theory is one thing, but practical is really the key. You gotta make sure it works. And what we said is we wanted to prove it, make sure it works over a period of time. So same thing with the groundwater interceptor well. It seems pretty simple, but we want to be able, and we can learn from it. So the intent this summer is to go ahead and put the interceptor trench. We're going to be working on the central area and to monitor it and to see how we can control it to achieve our goals.
Any other place in New Hampshire done this? Or are you leading the pack?
We are leading the pack in more than one way. While there are many groundwater discharge permits in the state, and there are major ones, like in Conway has a very significant discharge permit, bigger than ours, but they're tied right into the Saco River, and they don't have any wetland soil between their RIBs and the brook. Farmington also has RIBs in the same similar situation. On the Cachico, they have a RIBs, right? No wetland soils between them and the brook, so they don't have those issues. So we have the unique issues of having a significant discharge with the wetland soils between our RABs and in the brook. So that way it puts us in kind of a unique situation.
New science.
It's not new science, because it's all old science, but it's making sure we apply it practically and make sure we do it, that it works and sustainable. So that's one of the reasons we're being a little more cautious. And the other thing is, because the state is kind of like a partner, I think Tuftonboro has been a partner, and I was talking to the Conservation Commission, we've kind of worked pretty closely with the Conservation Commission, and we've taken input. And again, this is a long-term problem that we have to solve. I'm going to be here for a long period of time, and again, we're trying to be careful with it. So our goal again is 18 to prove the groundwater interceptor trench will work, and then we'll finalize the engineering and permitting. And in 2019, we'll be looking at doing the final construction and finishing in 2020.
So have you permitted for this? Have you gone through the permit process?
Yes, we have. Every
So
year.
do we have a copy of the permit for Tuftonboro?
We haven't dug any, the only permit we had there was for the sand trap, which was done in 2010. So all the permitting we're doing in the pilot is all on the top, Wolfboro side so far. So once, we were hoping.
You've got a breakout section here.
Correct.
So the impact isn't just in Wolfboro. And I think, and I may be wrong, but I think that your permit is insufficient in that your impact area, you should be talking to the Army Corps of Engineers as well. I remember looking at your original permit, and the acreage limit seemed to come just underneath the requirement for the Army Corps of Engineers. So I'd be interested to see how that plays out. I also think what you're looking at is not just the 6 acres that you've outlined here, but it would appear that the topography of the Tuftonboro side means, and I looked at the reports, and it appears as though the Tuftonboro soils are a lot better for your project than the Wolfboro soils are. So my assumption is that you're moving north into Tuftonboro with a significant portion of your project. And I have to ask the question, does Tuftonboro need a major septic system? No. We're not under any orders to create a septic disposal system that's, municipal size.
I'm not sure
I don't know why we should get involved at all. I just don't. You happen to snuggle up against the Tuftonboro border initially. Well, you have every right to use the property in Wolfboro the way you see fit. Now you want to come into Tuftonboro with your project. And I'm trying to justify that to the citizens of Tuftonboro and to myself. You're already impacting 19 Mile Brook. You're putting, even if it's 300,000 gallons of water or effluent.
Correct.
And that's a significant impact. I mean, that's
All right, well,
a 1-inch rain event every month.
Okay, you went on and asked 3 questions and jumped around. First, you talked about the Army Corps of Engineers, and that's getting back to the reporting, so I can answer that, or do you want to get right into the necessity, which
You
is
can
really...
do whatever you want. I asked you some questions, just answer whatever you want.
Okay, so with regards to Army Corps of Engineers, you're correct that there is a cutoff when you get to about a certain amount of wetlands disturbance, then the Army Corps kicks in. Army Corps will kick in ultimately still to get the review. But again, the question comes into what does the Army Corps going to do for us that because it's such a unique situation and that we've taken responsibility for it and been working closely with New Hampshire DES, the Groundwater Bureau, the Wetlands Bureau, the Wastewater Bureau, and the Surface Water. So we've met with them and doing everything, and we're more than happy to bring Army Corps in if we
You get another level of engineering, you get national scope of engineering, you get a different person as opposed to the same person who designed this or approved the system from DES
Right.
is currently working on it now.
Right, yeah, and if you believe that,
this
yeah,
is
the feds are
fail.
here to help you, yeah, they're
Right.
going to definitely help you, yeah. Well, they're going to be here regardless because it is permitting, but I don't think they're going to bring any expertise that we haven't brought to the table already. But we've got to follow all the rules and regulations, so we'll do that. So with the Army Corps, they will be involved, and it's in terms of the restoration of the wetlands. So let's move on to the question, which is the end, which is more important, is the necessity. The town of Wolfboro is the kind of a regional center. We have the high school, we have the hospital, we have Brewster Academy, we have over 20 or 30 restaurants, we have churches and clubs, and because of that, we have and the reason we have that density is because we have a wastewater collection system and a water distribution system. The water system's been in since 1890s, the sewer collection and treatment system's been since the 1940s. As a result of that, that is a public necessity. We have to find a solution that is good not only for the town of Wolfboro, but it's good for all of the state of New Hampshire, which is why we're regulated by the rules. When we look at the effluent disposal, the state put a state law in back in 1930s that said you can't discharge raw wastewater to Lake Winnipesaukee. Good law. But at that time, we had politicians say, well, exclude Smith River and Back Bay. What? So we got a couple of years, and then in 1940, they said, wait a second, Smith River is part of Lake Winnipesaukee. You can't put raw wastewater in there. And they sued the town. The town still didn't want to do anything. They finally sued us, and they actually designed the drawings and finally helped fund it. So in the 40s, we finally put in a sewer system, so we stopped discharging raw wastewater. Coming in the 70s, we came up with the Clean Water Act. And we said, okay, everyone now has to treat no more discharge to the whole country. So we have the Clean Water Act, and that's when the money came in. So we had built this beautiful plant in the 40s, ran it into the ground. So by the 60s now, we're not doing very good treatment. We built a whole new treatment facility, again, 95% funded by the states and the feds, and then come into the 70s and come to the 90s, 20 years later, ran the plant into the ground again. So we were now looking at administrative order in the early 90s. And at the same time now, the spraying was going on from the 70s to the 90s without a lot of oversight. And we then turned ourselves in the 90s and said, hey, look, we got a problem here. Even though the engineers declared victory and won a big award back in the 70s, but by the 90s we had issues, and we started to study them, and that resulted in an administrative order saying, you got to do something. The spray is running off. And that's when we started with the looking at all the solutions. When we looked at all the solutions, we found this site, which again was excellent site for getting that tertiary treatment. You can remember, at the plant, we can get rid of a lot of the BOD, suspended solids, and nitrogen, but the phosphorus is the key element that we're worried about getting into the lakes. And phosphorus does attach to sand, so in the sand treatment, it's a very effective way of getting rid of the phosphorus. So when we looked at that, we came up with this plan, and again, even though it was flawed because of the capacity and because of the wetland soils, we invested $7 million up here. And now going forward, we're still looking at what is the best solution. By far, this is still our best solution. Now, why does Tuftonboro have to get involved? Well, we, again, proposed it. We had our meetings and hearings back in 2006 and 7, and when it got approved, it was always shown as the water goes in the ground in Wolfboro, and it's going to come out, most of it's coming out through here. And then, as you say, the topography is very unique here, so that we have these, as the esker was developed the last ice age, we're seeing most of the groundwater is following and relieving itself within this area right here. This is why we're saying, in terms of the taking, we want to have that area. It's not going any further. We're going to do some more testing down here. In fact, I met with Mark Meehan and agreed to test his well to assure him that nothing is getting beyond this point, that the geology and the groundwater is all going in that direction. So we feel it is contained here, so the town of Tuftonboro doesn't have to do anything. But it's a necessity because it's for the public benefit that we need to do this and correct this and make sure we have the long-term solution that will sustain us for 20 to 50 years going forward.
Well, it's for the public benefit of Wolfboro, and if you want to include that as the regional hub.
Do you ever have breakfast? Do you ever eat over in Wolfboro? Do you ever go to
That's
hospital?
immaterial.
Sure, no, it is. It's not. It's
It
very
is
important.
absolutely immaterial.
So you think that
It is absolutely immaterial to this situation, because you're saying that just because we have breakfast in Wolfboro, we should accommodate their septic. What I'm saying is that you've got enough property within the confines of Wolfboro, and even if you look at your $80 million pipe to Franklin,
Yes.
if that were an option,
Sure.
that's not totally out of the realm of possibilities if you look at 20 or 30-year bonds. I just don't know why we're put in a situation where, because I have breakfast in Wolfboro, I have to take your septic system.
Because we, as a community, why we put together lines to say, here's Tuftonboro, here's Wolfboro, here's Ospey,
Right.
here's Alton. The fact is, we're all connected by water. Lake Winnipesaukee is a watershed that includes multiple towns. It includes almost the whole region.
If you could possibly contain this system
Yes.
within the confines of Wolfboro,
Yes.
we're still accommodating your effluent. It's not going into Wolfboro, it's going through 19 Mile Brook into 19 Mile Bay.
Absolutely, 100%.
So we're already accommodating that. There's nothing
Right.
we can do about that.
Right.
What I'm saying is that I have no assurances from you or anybody else that this is going to be the limit of your taking in Tuftonboro, that this is going to be that you're not going to crank this up to 600,000 gallons at some point in time. that you're actually gonna include us into the permitting process, that you've gone through a permitting process that's transparent, that you've actually done the,
So you're calling me a liar, so
No,
you're saying all this is
I'm not
false,
calling you a
that we
liar at
haven't
all.
done the due diligence,
did your,
and that you're
did
just
you,
speaking for the town
did
now?
you, did your system fail?
Yes, it did. I told
Did
you
it fail?
Absolutely failed.
Okay, and you're saying you're absolutely bulletproof guaranteed it's never gonna fail again?
I just went through and instead we spent much more time, more engineering, and as an engineer can do, I can assure you that what we're putting in now is gonna be sustainable in the long-term solution.
And the long-term solution is what in your mind?
I'm not sure, I thought I explained it, but I'll do it again. We're gonna collect the water that's
No,
gonna.
no, I understand what the process is. Are you telling me this is gonna be good for 10 years, 25 years, 30 years, 50 years? What is your expectation?
My expectations is a minimum of 20 and possibly to 50 years. That's what I said already 3 times today, so you know, that's,
Okay.
it's a long-term
So 20
solution.
years ago was 1998. I can certainly remember that, I'm sure you can. What are you gonna do at the end of 20 years? What's your long-term solution for your septic system?
So be up here for at least 50 years.
What is your long-term solution? You're not gonna continue to have no hookups in Wolfboro.
I just explained that our capacity is going to be capped at the permit limit, which is gonna be around 350,000. We're keeping in reserve 200 acres in Wolfboro, where we have our spray area, but we do anticipate decommissioning that, but keeping that in reserve. This site should be able to withstand us for 20 to 50 years. We're not expanding the sewer system, we're only having fill-in. So while we see our wastewater flows going down by 50,000 gallons a day, we see the potential over 20 years of increasing with connections to 50,000. So we see that being a neutral, so we're not gonna have any additional capacity. We see this site being a 20 to 50-year solution.
The one other thing is, didn't you shut down RIP one, the small one that's closer to their side?
We did, yeah, that's kind of a smaller detail, but that's, I guess I'm still somewhat confused as to the selectmen's concerns here. That, again, we always was concerned. Obviously, if we failed once, you could fail again, it's true, but which is why we're being much more cautious, while we're getting more than one opinion. We've had multiple, we're spending quite a bit of money on consultants, making sure that we're not going to repeat the mistakes that were made last time. And again, we're doing our best. And again, that's all I can tell you is where we're at with it. The nothing, you say expanding, we're not expanding, all we're doing is
You've
with
already
regard.
expanded. You've already expanded.
Where-
Because your permit does not include Tuftonboro.
It certainly does.
It does currently, it didn't originally.
This is the maps we shown, originally the water's gonna go in the ground here, come out in Tuftonboro. It was always
Yeah.
shown
It's,
that.
it's gonna come through the 19-mile brook, absolutely right.
No, it came across into the Witten Trust, into the western zone. It was always shown this way, so I'm not sure where you're saying it's
Then
different.
your permit's imperfect in the acreage alone. But if, so you're saying you've already invaded Tuftonboro to the extent of this breakout right here. So in deference to your failed system, we should just fall off this project completely and say, fine, go ahead, whatever you need to do. And our mandate as selectmen is not to be, obdurate about these things, but we have to protect the sovereign borders of Tuftonboro. I mean, what sort of permitting are you gonna go through with us? What sort of bonding are you gonna present to us to say that our public beach at 19 Mile Bay is never gonna be polluted? That you're gonna do significant testings on the whole brook? That you're gonna do yearly or quarterly testings of the volume of water in that brook? What sort of effort are you gonna make for Tuftonboro?
I don't think I'm gonna make any effort with you convincing you of anything, because you've got your mind set up. And again, for the last 8 years, I've been working very closely with other people in Tuftonboro. Any input I received, we will do. Whatever increased testing we can do. But the reality is, your beach is getting polluted right now by septic systems, by the camp leach lagoons, by people in boats. We're always under threat by everything.
Right.
So you gotta understand that. You've got approved sand and gravel pit up here. That whole Witten Trust is approved for sand and gravel pit. We're looking at a 6-acre parcel to restore back to as close as possible to the way it was originally. and then to make sure it stays that way for the next 20, 50 years, which is why we've been in discussions with the trust for many years. They knew about it. We offered a lease or a purchase. They wanted to purchase. And the reason we went eminent domain is because they were trying to get more than we think is more than fair. We don't want to do eminent domain. Our goal is to still reach it, and we're still hopefully that we'll negotiate a settlement. But the reality is, we're not expanding. This is always the way it was originally permitted. All we're doing is restoring the wetlands that were damaged, and to put in the interceptor trenches, upgrade of that, and to put it back in the ground where it belongs and where it was originally permitted.
If your injections, well, let's move the topography. Let's put this hill over here. It still has the effluent going into 92 Mount Brook.
Yes.
You still won that battle, because I wasn't here maybe. But you snuggled it right up against the border. You created the problem, we didn't. So now we're in a situation where you want to expand this facility into Tuftonboro.
You keep saying expanding, we're not expanding anything. This is the
Of course
original
you
way it was
are.
it's not.
Then don't buy it.
Which haven't.
Leave your permit alone, don't buy it.
That's absurd. We have a
Is it?
responsibility. The state is gonna make us fix that.
Yeah, they're
So
gonna make
what-
you fix it.
Right.
So how are you gonna fix it?
We've got the plan together, we got the permits, we're doing the pilot
You
test of
have
the shoot.
one way of fixing it in your mind. You're being as stonewall as I am. You're saying the only way to go forward is to expand into Tuftonboro. And I'm saying the only way you can go forward is to not expand into Tuftonboro.
Okay, well, then we're gonna have to agree to disagree. And again, if he speaks for the board, and he's doing all the talking, do you all agree with him? Is this a unanimous decision that you guys wanna fight us on this?
We're gathering information. Chip has a lot of questions. Our board has not made any decisions at this point, but certainly our responsibility is to protect the town of Tuftonboro. And, you know, we want to be a good neighbor, no question about it. I think we've always had a good relationship between this town and Wolfboro, and we want to continue that. But after the breakout in the initial RIB and some of what's gone on, you've done some great work in terms of trying to figure out how to deal with it going forward. It sounds to me like the work that you're doing to figure out a way to recapture this stuff and get it back into the ground is probably on the right track. But ultimately, if we look down the road, with the way the effluent or the water coming out of the RIB flows, it does end up in Tuftonboro. What safeguards do we need to put in place, and how do we do that so that in the future, if there becomes a problem, that it's adequately addressed?
Well, I need to know, we're gonna work together the way we have been in the last 8 years, in which I take input from the Conservation Commission, any additional testing you would like to see, if we're not doing enough, if there's something else we can do to further provide confidence that we are being good stewards and that we are watching. But if you're saying is that you're gonna fight us, and that you're gonna try to stop this and try to make us spend $80 million, go somewhere else, because the only other solution, like you said, is to take this, pick it up and go somewhere else. Well, we've looked everywhere else. This is the only site that has this capacity. We already have quite a bit of money invested in it. So the idea that we can just pick this up and move it somewhere else is almost, it's just crazy. But if that's the position you're gonna have, then that puts us into an unfortunate situation.
You created the problem, but beyond that, you want to work together, you want to be collegial about this. Why is it that I have to read in the Granite State News that you're going to have a public hearing for an eminent domain taking in Tuftonboro? How is that collegial?
I believe the town manager called here, told you.
Town manager called.
Right, give you a heads up.
Right.
Right.
Heads up. No, I don't need to talk to a town manager. I need to talk to a selectman. I didn't get a call from a selectman. You
Well,
know,
I
there's
think you have a
protocol.
different form of government.
No,
And
we both have the same.
no,
form of
we
government.
have a 5-man board, and we have a town manager, you have a town administrator. And the town manager met with the board, and that's why it came. But I think what really is happening here is Wolfville wants to take care of the issue that's on the Tufton Borough side. That's what this is all about. There's a breakout, we've come to a solution, and we have met with you, we brought you on walkouts. I was with you on that walkout. I've been with the Conservation Commission when they've gone on walkout. We're trying to take care of the land. This was a solution, it was permitted, we felt we had it. Our quality of our effluent is very high before it even gets to this site. We won an award, was it last year, David, for our plant?
Yep, 2016.
You know, so we're trying to be real good neighbors. We're trying to address our needs, and we are a center. We have your kids up at the middle school and the high school. We have to deal with their effluent. We do have a system. We're trying to take good care of that and take care of the lake. I'm with Bill on the milfoil joint board. I don't want any more pollutants to have to deal with milfoil or anything else, and we have been able to work together. And I'm sorry you weren't with us from the beginning, because we have kept you up, everybody else up to date, and if we failed to keep you as up to date as you wanted, then I'm sorry about that. But I think what's here, and the reason we want it, and the Witten Trust sold us that land, and everybody knew what was going in, and I agree with David, that was always part, that going that western discharge was always part of what we were talking about. And I've been here from the start, so.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I certainly take the hit for not doing a little more due diligence before I came to the meeting. But that said, I'll reread the permitting, and shame on the selectmen who were here prior. If Tufton Borough property was included in that permit, then Tufton Borough should have been involved in it, physically involved in it. And so we're stuck with what you have, obviously, but you're stuck more than we're stuck. You need to have this. If you don't get this part, I don't see that your system's gonna work. I really don't. I mean, I've read this stuff. I don't
What do you
think
mean it's not gonna work?
I mean, if you can't acquire this property.
Why do you think we can't acquire the property?
I don't think you're gonna acquire the property because you haven't gone through the Board of Land Appeals yet. We haven't gone to court over whether or not you could take it by eminent domain, whether you really have a purpose. There's any number of reasons why you can't take property in another town. You haven't got a legislative approval for changing your boundaries,
We're not asking to change boundaries.
so you're not gonna change your boundaries.
Thank you.
But at any rate, let's assume for a moment you don't get that piece of property. Then what happens to this?
It's not an option. We have to fix the
If
problem.
this, if you don't get this,
Yes,
what happens to this?
that's not an option. Again, we have to fix the problem. So we're gonna get it one way or another, whether it's in lease, purchase, or eminent domain, we're gonna get it, we're gonna fix the problem. The other option is, okay, we tell everyone, shut off the water, everyone move out of Wolfboro, we'll close the town down. Is that what you want us to do? We have nowhere to put the effluent. I don't understand your question. You're almost like, this is a done deal. Yes, we're here, we're not going anywhere, we have responsibility to fix the problem, but it's gonna
So
be.
this is your only option.
The $80 million option, or again, it's not feasible. Again, we're not gonna be, again, it's a huge amount of money. We don't have that kind of money. We have 1,000 customers in the sewer system. As it is now,